Thank you so much. Good words to start off the morning, Vicki. I'm going to tell you a little story that I've told some of you, and I told some of you from LA yesterday. I have a grandson named Isaac who's 6, and he's a pretty bright kid. He is, and I don't actually say that about all of them, but this one I do. He is. And he has, I was thinking of Vicki, and I was thinking of, he has this gift of, he's like his own little GPS. You can ask him how to get anywhere. He loves the maps. He loves whatever. So he went to LA, which somebody told me. And I said, what are you going to do? You're so excited. He said, Noni, I get to go on the 405. Wow, okay, good. And maybe even the 110. I said, well, I can't wait to hear how it goes for you. So he came back and I said, how was the 405? He said, it was great, But then his dad said, tell her about the rest of the day, which he didn't want to. Because apparently they were getting in the car to come back home here. And Isaac said, all right, you get on I-5 North. And that's how we get home. And his mom said, well, today, Isaac, we're going to take 99 because we're going to go visit friends. And from the back seat, it went, no, we go on I-5 North to get home. So there was a little back and forth, I-5 North, 99. And finally, he just could not help himself anymore, and he said, look, I am the smartest person in the car, and I'm telling you, we go on I-5 North. Much to his dismay, they went on 99, but he did find out that there was more than one way to get home. And I think about all of you, and I think of Vicki's work. There is more than one way for all of our children. And what we are good at is understanding that there is more than one way that kids get to where they need to be. And we need to be mindful all the time of creating lots of ways for kids and families to get where they need to be. So with that, now it's my pleasure, right, to introduce Khydeeja, who is the Director of Governmental Relations at Advancement Project California and leads statewide advocacy efforts. She has been a champion for children in statewide policy, advocating for issues related to the state budget and ECE and K-12 education, healthcare, and civic engagement. And she has her own children, so she's doing this all the time, whether at work or at home. So please welcome Khydeeja Alam Javid.
Good morning. Coming together is a beginning. Keeping together is progress. Working together is success. As this is the final year of the Birth to 5 water cooler, I wanted to briefly talk about the state of early care and education in California and opportunities that we have for our children. Funding for California state's subsidized early care and education program was cut by 40% after the Great Recession. While our state has made investments over the years, far fewer children overall are being served now than in 2007-08, the onset of the Great Recession. ECE saw its biggest increase in a decade in 2016. Over $500 million worth of increase for childcare and state-funded preschool programs over the course of 4 years. What does that buy us? By 2019 to 2020, about 9,000 slots for full-day state preschool and an increase in reimbursement rate for childcare providers to reflect the increase in the state's minimum wage. Yes, it is progress, just not fast enough. Because 9 years after the Great Recession, ECE programs as a whole continue to operate below pre-recession level. Because roughly 70,000 children, eligible children, are still without access to childcare or preschool. Because 64% of our state's eligible children do not have access to these programs. The point is that we have a long way to go, and we're not going to get there by a piecemeal approach. Few thousand slots here, a percentage of state increase there, no. We are going to have to take a systems change approach. It's going to be a little bit of give and take, and we're going to have to think big and force our policymakers to think big with us. We will need our elected officials to step up, just like they did for cap and trade, just like they stepped up for affordable housing, and just like they stepped up to vote for a $5 billion a year transportation and infrastructure package. Policymakers stepped up even though these votes were extremely unpopular. By those standards, a bold ECE package should be a piece of cake. First time in recent history, we have a Speaker of the Assembly who is an early education champion. We have more sitting elected officials now than ever before who ran on a universal preschool platform and won the office. We have staggering 90% of California voters who support investments in early education. Now, we just need to make sure that our next Senate leader and our next governor are both early care and education champions. Transformative policies get made when political timing is right. My friends, the timing is just right to start having those conversations. So let's talk about it. Let's be bold in our ask, in our thinking. Let's make our children birth to 5 the central issue for the next governor, for the next Senate President Pro Tem, the Speaker that we currently have, and all the elected officials in the office. And let's do it together with one voice. That is our job as a collective. To take this conversation further, it is my pleasure to introduce my colleague, my friend, Karla Howell, who is the Director of Educational Equity at the Advancement Project California. She's a fierce champion for our youngest children, for social justice, and she truly embodies the next generation civil rights leader. She will be facilitating and introducing our next panel on the early childhood education landscape policy.
Doesn't matter what it says.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning. Wow, that's
Did we like our rallying cries yesterday to the next gubernatorial candidates? We're thrilled that that conversation will continue today. Before it continues, we need to dive a little bit deeper on some of the issues that we're working through for our kids. In particular, it's a difficult time for our kids when we think about what we're hearing from the federal government. The popular CHIP program, popular in both parties, actually was punted simply because we couldn't figure out when we would make that decision. Decisions like that impact our kids in a way that we will see in the future. But most importantly, the money that should have gone to our kids is now going to go to administrative costs to tell families we're not going to have this program, and then it might come back later. And we'll hear a lot more about that. That will impact 5.6 million kids. We'll hear about that today. In addition, we heard announcements about Daca early in the summer. And when announcements like Daca are made, our decision makers in the federal government just sort of throw it out. And what it does for families is completely heartbreaking. We've heard families negotiating for their kids' lives of who will be taking care of their kids when they're deported. And it is just a decision that was thrown out there. That's the type of environment that we have to work through. That's what California needs to figure out. How are we going to protect the rights of our kids? And it is my honor to have these 4 women in this panel who actually will talk about what we're doing, what we're considering, how we're pushing the boundaries a little bit more, just to make sure that we are thinking of that long-term system. So you have the bios of these remarkable individuals in your packets, but let me start with Xilonin. Thank you. I asked Xilonin to correct me with the name pronunciation in the middle. She is the board vice president of Susa Unified School District, and we'll be talking about what we're doing in our districts to make sure that our kids get the services they need. Next, we have Amy. Amy Matsui is joining us from the National Women's Law Center, so we will hear this federal perspective. Thank you, Amy. Next, we have Sarah Neville-Morgan in her newly, almost new position with the California Department of Education, who will push us to keep on thinking of systemic change for our kids. And last but not least, we have Lola Cornish of the Resource and Referral Network. So each of you, if you could just take about 5 minutes and tell us where we are with our kids. And we will start with Amy, the federal perspective, and come on in at the local level a little bit more. And once we hear from Amy, we'll go to the California Department of Education.
Thank you so much, Karla. It's really a pleasure for me to be here, and especially on this panel with such great California advocates who are doing the best to make sure that our youngest kids and our greatest resources are getting what they need to succeed in school and beyond. So I'm going to talk a little bit. There is so much happening on the federal level. It is dizzying to be there, and what you were hearing get thrown around is, I am sympathetic to the scale and the confusion, so I'm going to focus on 4 kind of critical areas that impact the youngest learners in my remarks today. So I'm going to start with what Karla mentioned around CHIP reauthorization. There are 3 main programs for young children that need to be reauthorized this year. Both CHIP and McV, the maternal infant care home visiting program, expired on September 30th. So as you all know, those are state partnerships, and there was a disagreement about whether or not they actually needed to get reauthorized by September 30th when they expired. There were bipartisan bills that were in the Senate, and the problem that we're seeing is in the House of Representatives. So for example, the Senate bill on CHIP reauthorization got tangled up in the health care repeal efforts and did not move forward. So that bill is just kind of hanging out and waiting until they figure that out. But on the House side, the House has not actually developed a bill yet. So there are committee hearings that are going to happen next week in order to move that forward. But Karla pointed to the confusion that leads to on the state level. We're trying to figure out how different states can make the funding last until the program gets reauthorized, and the impact that has administratively and on the families that are served is obviously significant. For the home visiting program, there's similarly a bipartisan bill on the Senate side, but the House has developed a really concerning proposal where they want to take money out of SSI and also require a state match. So not only is there a lack of resolution, but there are some really troubling proposals out there. I'm also going to mention just really briefly that the Headstart program is supposed to be reauthorized this year, even though they're currently trying to implement changes to health and safety and to extend the services for Headstart families. The money was not authorized to move forward on those, so that's an area of concern, and folks are pushing hard to make sure that that happens. Obviously, one of the main areas of federal funding that we care about, especially for lower income families, is the Child Care and Development Block Grant. As you all know, it's a program that's been underfunded for years, so that across the country, only 1 in 6 eligible children is receiving assistance through CCDBG. The health and safety requirements that were put in place in 2014 make it even harder for states to continue to serve all the families who need it while they're trying to implement the health and safety and quality requirements and the flexibility requirements so that families don't get kicked out of the program and continue to use those. So we're watching, because the caps on the federal budget process make it even harder to make sure that CCDBG is funded as much as it needs to. The one more thing that I'll mention before I try and end the federal part on a positive note is that you all have heard about tax reform, and you may be thinking, why are we as early childhood advocates caring about taxes? And the main impact that that has is when they're trying to push a package of tax cuts that could cost $2.5 trillion over the next 10 years, where do you think they're going to get that money from? So that's going to be an additional pressure to cut budget programs that serve children and families. And in addition, the House is agreeing to let cuts to SSI, to Medicaid, and to other mandatory programs to be used to pay for these tax cuts, which are going overwhelmingly towards corporations and high income. But on a positive note, which is where I'll end, a couple of weeks ago, Senator Murray from Washington and Representative Bobby Scott from Virginia did put forth a bill which is a really sweeping bill proposing a vision for childcare and getting families what they need. It focuses on making sure that families don't pay more than 7% of their income on childcare expenses. It focuses on quality, on underserved communities, and making sure that the workforce has a professional development ladder towards getting the compensation and the education and training that they need. So, we want to, on the federal level, always be focusing on the example that states like California, which are investing, maybe not everything that needs to be invested, but investing and continuing to make priority for young kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy. It's appreciated to actually get a foreshadowing of why we need to be paying attention to these issues, because California can help in figuring out where is it that we need to move. So thank you for that background. And that brings us to you, Sarah. Where is California going? What is it that we should be focusing on? And what do you really see both as challenges and opportunities for the upcoming year?
Sure. First, I want to say thank you to everybody. This last year, we had more successful things happen in the budget, I think, than like the 10 years before. So truly thank you to everybody who made that happen. And Deneen remarked as I walked in that her staff were like, oh, you just posted yet another thing, the amount of management bulletins that we've been posting and getting up. And I am so glad that 12-month got out before I came up here, because I'm sure that would have been a question if I hadn't. There's a lot of good that happened in this past year, and it took a lot of people coming together as one voice, one ask, to make those happen. So truly thank you. Now we're moving into implementation, and I just wanted to remark a little bit on the scope of California. And we live it every day. But in sort of my return to the department, one of the things I looked at was how many kids do we serve? We serve over 400,000 children, and then another 90,000 are in the TK program. So that seems really large, but we are not there yet. At the same time, we look at other states who get to say they serve 80% of their eligible children, would love to be at 80%. That 80% translates into 12,000 children. So it's just that scope of the effort that we have to do. If we're at 400, 490 and not there yet, and other states are close at 12, the scope and magnitude means that we can't do it as a state agency. We can't do it in partnership with DSS. We have to do it with all of the local partners. And that's why I think California does have such a state, local system that we have put together. So that was my first thing, just the thank you about the multiple successes. Some things happened over the last year that really helped us get there, as well as the One Voice. There was an AB 104 work group, and I think a lot of the things that were implemented either came from CCDBG reauthorization and needing to move forward on some key pieces, as well as that work group and those voices. So some really long overdue things that have been something that the field needed, but I would say even more than that, our kids needed, our children and their families. So as we looked at stabilizing and increasing family eligibility, the largest win for that 12-month is that child, that baby, who then has the continuity of care with their provider, with their teacher, and their family has that continuity. They have that relationship they've built. They know who to go ask questions from. It's that trust and that back and forth. So we all know quality is really dependent on those interactions. So huge things that really were an enormous win for our California families. There was also looking at the true cost of care. We're not there yet, as you would all say, but we did get slightly more there as we move forward. So big things there. But moving forward, as we look at that one system and ensuring quality for all our kids, there is more to do. And one of the things I think as we look and feel troubled at either what's happening at the federal level or troubled as we look across at some of the pockets and things that are happening, we really in early childhood have such an opportunity to mitigate that. We are the educational equity. We are the place where children learn values, they learn acceptance, all of the anti-bias curriculum, all of the pieces that we know are important as they move out around inclusivity, around acceptance, around understanding multiple languages, that happens in those first couple years. So what an opportunity and a gift we have to help change those trajectories. So as we looked at educational equity, I think what I hear and what I know I really care about, first is increasing our infant toddler. So we know that we need more for our babies, and I'm gonna have to speed it up a little. Second is our rates. We know that they still need to be increased, and we keep talking about how do we move to a one-rate system that looks at regions, that looks at the true cost, and really, truly incentivizes things like quality in infant toddler. So how do we get there? And the Murray bill, I look at that and I was like, drop the mic, done. Like, we can only run that. It truly is, if you haven't looked at it, a beautiful piece of work. And then quality to scale. And when I say quality scale, it's beyond Quality Counts California, which is what we're calling our QRS, but really in that setting of quality, making sure that all early learning settings are quality, making sure that they can all participate in that spectrum, even if they're not getting rated, they should still be on the quality improvement on-ramp. And key in that is the compensation. We will all say that our teachers need to be compensated. They must in order to have quality. We also need to make sure that support for dual language learners and for teachers and educators, that is the other key part of quality. So in California, we have such an asset around bilingualism. The State Board of Education just approved the English Language Learner Roadmap. That is foundational. How do we take that? It includes preschool, but we know that our babies' brains actually can learn multiple languages. So how are we helping support them in their home language, helping all of our kids with bilingualism? And my last thing there is full inclusion. As we look at quality, as we look at ensuring our children have that anti-bias piece, we need to make sure that our programs include all children, that when we say all, we mean all, and that instead of having more and more standalone programs, our programs include all children. And so building that system as we look at continuous quality improvement happens both within those state agencies as we build our competency, moves to the regional and moves to those local programs. So it's truly that one system, one voice together. And I'll end with, I keep saying it's not parallel play. We have to move beyond a system of parallel play to a system of cooperative play where we're all sharing, engaging together.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for the reminder that we need to move away from more a patchwork system. We've been talking about it for several years, and this panel is about the different parts of that system. So you will get a difficult question on that afterwards in terms of how we do that play. But Xilonin has been a school board member, and you don't come from the ECE world, but you're pushing for ECE opportunities and services. And Sarah mentioned there are 90,000 kids being served in transitional kindergarten, and you're leading that charge. Can you share a little bit about what that is like, what school boards need to make that happen?
Sure. And I'll just start with just giving you a little context. So I'm a school board member in Azusa, around 8,500 students, about 88% free and reduced, 25% English learners. And when I got to my school district as a board member 16 years ago, we did have preschool, but it had been outsourced. So YMCA, a strong partner, but they were the ones running the programs on our school sites. And so they did for most of those years. But when the LCAP came in, we saw it as an opportunity to be able to invest in early childhood education. And I'm really grateful that our staff also strongly believed in it and felt that this was a really important thing. And so we took that opportunity to invest in our preschools. So in the first year of, well, actually the second year, because the first year was just mid-year implementation, but the first year, we added 3 preschool classes through our LCAP. And we also put into the plan to hire a teacher on special assignment, a coach, right? So this is a complete system to make sure that we're supporting the teachers as they're putting the programs in. And then the next year, we added 2 more sections because we saw the value of that. And then this past year, because we've been starting to add state preschools, and we're so grateful for all the advocacy that there's been opportunity to add sections. We've actually shifted that money. We maintain 1 preschool section because we have a dual language immersion program, and we're funding a preschool and a TK section through the LCAP. But we also decided, we kept that pot of money at ECE, but we decided to do expanded TK. And I understand, there's mixed feelings about it, but the reality in our district is with TK, we didn't have enough enrollment, and so we had a lot of TKK combo classes, which are not quality education for any of these kids. So by investing in expanded TK this year, we're able to have standalone TK classrooms, and that means that those kids are getting developmentally appropriate instruction, right? So it looks more like preschool than it looks like kindergarten. And so I feel good about that choice that we made. And it also, I feel like we're now serving more students, right? Because now we're able to serve more 3-year-olds in our preschool classes. I will say it's not all been, time's running out fast. So that's where we are as a district. But I will say it's really important for you. I think that you guys do a lot of advocacy and you don't know really, if there's impact or not. But I will say as a board member, there were some key moments where I feel like hearing from people in this room is really what turned the light bulb on me. And NALEO actually put on National Association of Latino Elected Officials put on an Early Childhood Education Institute for school board members in California a couple years ago. And it was there hearing Kim Patillo-Brownson talking about the important understanding that you can use LCAP for ECE. That really sort of got myself thinking. And really the support, you heard Vicki Ramos-Harris. She actually came to our district, sat down with our staff, and helped us think through what we could do with ECE, where we could go. And then Children Now actually has been really helpful in terms of thinking about the bigger picture. So, and in getting connected with Eduardo and Kendra from Children Now, we actually passed a resolution this year declaring ourselves a PK through 12 school district. And I'll tell you, so yes. So I think people most assume that the P is for preschool, but in my mind, to me, that's prenatal, right? So it's why are we thinking P? We got to think from the beginning. So somehow I'm going to try to get us down to that area. So I know time's up, so I'm going to be really brief. There's 2 other places where I think that we need to touch upon. I actually work for Californians Together, English Learner Advocacy, and so there's 2 great opportunities. Prop 58 just passed. Right? I think that school districts are starting to think about bilingual education, dual language, but we need help from ECE because our kids, they need to be able to, if we're going to maintain their primary language and support them, we need to make sure that they're getting the same kind of instruction with dual language learning in the ECE years. So that's really key. And then the other part that I would mention is, and Karla already mentioned it, with the whole issue around immigration. You know, when DACA happened and this issue happened this last month, some people at K-12 are thinking, well, you know, that's not really mostly our kids, they're mostly higher ed. But the reality is, these are probably our parents, right? Some of them are 37 years old. So these are parents of our kids and our systems. And so how are we making sure that we have welcoming environments for those students? So I think with that, I think we're going to have a rich discussion right now about some of this.
Thank you, Xilonin. Xilonin reminds us to also keep on questioning quality. When we talk about expansion, it is wonderful to have those spaces, and she's been really terrific about asking, how is our district really thinking about quality, and turns to people in this room to figure that out. So to Sarah's point, it's about the collaboration with all of us. So thank you for sharing that. And last but not least, we need people that are taking care of our little ones. We need the system that has the infrastructure to show parents where to come. So from the resource and referral network, what highlights do you see for the upcoming year and themes that you think we need to be focusing on?
Well, I think to drill down a little deeper on some of the things that Sarah said, one of the biggest needs out there is care for infants and toddlers. And as our statewide QRIS is still kind of in its infancy, but beginning to congeal, I think, beautifully, thank you, it's crucial that we really think about where those children are. When we look at the supply of childcare, and I don't have current portfolio data because it won't be out until next month, but I can tell you that it probably hasn't changed much from last year, which was one licensed spot for every 4 children who have parents in the workforce. And for infant care, it's even less than that. And the majority of that infant care happens in those child care settings that tend to be somewhat forgotten: family child care and license exempt care. These are environments where the providers that are serving the children are predominantly women of color. Oftentimes, English is not the first language. So there's a different level of support that needs to occur for those providers to in turn be able to support our youngest citizens. As part of that, I think compensation is a huge issue for the entire field. As the minimum wage goes up, we see supply even of family childcare dwindling as providers can get a job outside of the home and earn significantly more than they can in the home. If a family childcare provider charged the average cost of care and only worked 40 hours a week, which is practically unheard of in childcare, they'd be making $5 an hour. And they could soon go somewhere else and make 15. The number of family childcare providers also continues to decrease. So it creates a conundrum for us when we think about where are all of those babies that we want to be in quality learning environments going to be. And it's an area of the system that we need to think strategically about how to shore up. The other factor that affects this population specifically is the increased focus on education, which we all know is a good thing, right? The better educated a provider is, the better they can serve those children. But according to recent CDTC data, only 63% of family childcare providers and 69% of their assistants have a high school or GED or less, and yet we're expecting college-bearing units for these folks. So again, I think we really need to be strategic about how we approach engaging these providers in increasing the quality that they're offering so that we can have better outcomes for those youngest learners.
Thank you, Lola. I'm going to shift gears a little and ask Amy this question. And I apologize, we are not going to have time for questions from the audience, so we hope we hit some of the things that you're considering. But the question that
both Sarah and Amy mentioned was the Murray-Scott Health Bill. There is so much excitement about this bill. In our field, we've asked for a vision. We get this tremendous vision from the bill. So I'm wondering, Amy, if you could get us started with telling us what this means for our field. Is it a feel-good bill, or what does it mean for our field? And then I'll set Sarah up, if you could respond, should California be looking at something like this for what we do here?
Thank you. So I think that just to be totally upfront, obviously a bill of this scope, the prospects of something like this passing this year are pretty dim. But the important thing I think that the bill does is it flips the narrative. We're not talking about dollars, we're not talking about spending caps, we're talking about what families need and what needs to happen so that the childcare that all of our kids are at and the workers who are providing the care for our youngest kids, we get what we need. And so that I think was really important to have that statement out there and just having someone kind of express the details of this is what we need for childcare to work for families. This is what we need so that the workers who are taking care of our youngest kids have what they need to take care of their families and get the professional development support that they need. And so I think that what the bill does is outline from the perspective of the people who are up to their necks in childcare what we need to make it work.
Thank you. And Sarah?
I agree. Even if it doesn't really have a chance of passing, it is a beautifully written bill. Yep. And just the summary of it, every point on there, I was like, check, check, check. They're all things that we've talked about wanting, and they've put it together beautifully in one narrative. So they have the quality piece core and central as the only way we're going to get the outcomes we need is if we're investing in quality. So then we have to make sure the compensation piece is there. We have to make sure the babies are more engaged. I mean, really, it has all of the pieces, including the spectrum of early learning settings, and really acknowledging that it is a continuum of early learning settings, and how are we engaging all of them in that. So yes, I'm staring down at Aaron Gable. Make it happen. I think all of us should go read that and then figure out, as we come together as one voice and really stressing, we can't go out and have different asks. It really does have to be a joint group effort for that ask. And Molly, thank you. I think the water cooler has been saying that from the very beginning. How do we sing one song? What is that playbook that we're all reading from? And we finally got there. And when we did get there, we got what we needed and what we asked for. We actually got, dare I say this, a little bit even more than we thought we were going to get. So let's go for it again, and let's keep, our children need and deserve this. California needs this in order to keep moving forward.
Thank you. So it seems like there is a clear call to action, a reading material for the teachers in the room. And it does provide us with a vision of what we should be considering. I want to turn to the issue on compensation and how we collaborate better. So Lola and Xilonin, this will be the last part, and I'm wondering if you could close us off on both how we create a system where the women that work, it's majority women that work in this field, are not adequately compensated for the amazing work they do for our young kids. So what do we need to do to actually play better together, all in the room, so that we get to the compensation and get to those issues? And Xilonin, at the district, you've also had some of these questions of what does compensation look like. So can you close this off on how we could all work better together to get there? So we'll start with Lola and then turn to Xilonin.
Well, I think it's an interesting conundrum. Certainly the reimbursement rates help for those who are receiving child care subsidies, but it's still not enough. So I think we still have advocacy in that area. How do we charge parents more for private providers if they can't afford to pay it? Creates a real issue. And I think it's going to take a global vision to really think about how we lift folks up and how we support them.
And I'll say two different things. One, I think in terms of the compensation, I actually was shocked when I found out how much preschool teachers are going to be paid. And as a school district, we actually pay a little higher than some of the privates around us. It's really shocking how low it is. But I will say we also heard a lot about that we want to have people with our young infants and our toddlers with high levels of education so that we can give them that rich literacy and what they need. So I think that there has to be a real deep conversation about how, as we as state, how do we design our policy to be able to get there? I mean, my understanding is that there's other states, I think maybe somebody told me Michigan has been looking at trying to figure out how to make this transition to having higher educational requirements, but also paying more. I think we have to have a real serious conversation about how we get there with those two pieces. But even without the education piece, we really have to look at how much we're paying these people, because it's really not fair. It's criminal. And then the other piece that I'll say, because I do come from K-12 and I do sit on the board of directors for CSBA, I think you heard very clearly yesterday that K-12 and higher ed, we're all underfunded, right? I think you guys are more underfunded than we are. But I think that as we move forward, I appreciate that there's going to be a birth to 12 water cooler, because I think we're all struggling with this issue. And I think if we're going to go to our voters, to our legislature, I think it behooves us to all be working together and figure out how can we comprehensively fund education across the board, right? So we don't end up competing with each other. So I'll finish with that.
Thank you. And for all the panelists, if you could just give us your last thoughts on what we should be considering for the upcoming year. And Lola, we'll start with you and just your concluding remarks for the audience.
Yeah, I would just mirror what Sarah said again, and let's stick together on this one. Let's be focused, let's be strategic, and let's go out there and kick some you-know-what.
I echo that with let's move to cooperative play as we move as one system.
And so I'll echo what Sarah said earlier, which is to get behind a vision. We like to say in my office that this is not the time to worry about the little things that can be done to make our programs better. We really need to get out of this time without structural changes to federal programs that are hard to get back. And so, looking for places you can make progress where it's possible, but not worrying about the small stuff right now, because it opens the door for big, bad things to happen.
And I'll finish it off saying, I mentioned it once already, Prop 58 just passed. There's a lot of momentum around English learners, dual language learners. Let's all capitalize on that, and let's move towards a vision where every student graduates from high school in the state bilingual. So.
Well, thank you very much. Again, please thank our panelists. Perfect.
Okay, great. What a great panel. I just want to clear up a rumor right now. A rumor's going around that I'm bitter that Sarah Neville-Morgan left First Five to go back to the department. I'll just say that's true. Okay? No. She's doing great. Department is so lucky to have her. Nice job, Sarah. So we are going to now take an official pause in the water cooler conference and resume our conversations with gubernatorial candidates. And Karla is going to kick us off.
Thank you. It's our proud, can you hear me? It's our proud legal moments of pausing and separating the two events so that if any of you have to have it separated, it's official. And you have two programs. So thank you again for being with us here today. We are thrilled and excited about day 2 of conversations with gubernatorial candidates Antonio Villaraigosa and Gavin Newsom. Gavin Newsom will be joining us via video conference. Yesterday, we heard from Delane Easton and John Chang, and I have some fun quotes for folks from the day. The Honorable Easton shared, "Prisons are an expense, preschools are an investment. Let's give every child universal preschool." And we heard the exact same thing from both candidates. And the Honorable John Chung also shared, children pay the price when adults get the budget wrong. From our treasurer. California needs full-day programs for early learners. So yesterday was just the beginning of a conversation with our gubernatorial candidates, and today we will go into day 2. And it really behooves us. Today would not be possible. Yesterday, the conversation with the candidates would not be possible had it not been for the vision of Molly Munger and the water cooler and bringing us all together to really lift up these issues for our elected officials. So thank you for the vision 10 years ago. And as we set on prioritizing our kids, I'm going to turn it over to our esteemed executive director to set the context for us. Sean Kim, will you join us?